My name is Anthony. I am 32 years old. I work as a machine programmer in a small factory. I live with my wife, Whitney. She is 33 years old. Whitney works as a teacher at a school near our house. She wakes up early every day. We eat dinner together. We watch TV. That night, everything was normal. I came home from work at 6 o'clock in the evening. At work, I had worked on a machine for a new project. My boss, Mr. Richard, was there. He saw me working. He said, "Good job, Anthony." I felt happy when he said that. At home, Whitney made pasta for dinner. We ate together and talked about our day. After dinner, I sat on the couch. I remember saying, "I think I will sleep early tonight." Whitney said, "Me too." We both went to bed before 10 o'clock. The morning began in a strange way. I did not wake up to my alarm. The room was still dark. I could hear a small sound. It was a phone vibrating. I looked around. Whitney was not in bed. Then I realized the sound was coming from the living room, my phone. I stood up and walked. I saw 2 missed calls, both from my boss, Mr. Richard. I checked the time. It was 5:56 in the morning. Why was he calling me this early? At that moment, Whitney came out of the bedroom. Her face looked pale. She said, "Anthony, your boss called me." I froze. I said, "He called you?" Whitney said, "Yes, he called me at 5:55. He asked where you are." I said, "Why did he call you?" Whitney said, "I don't know. I thought something bad happened." I said, "What do you mean?" Whitney looked at me. She said, "Mr. Richard woke me up. He asked, 'Is Anthony there?'" I didn't know what to think. I didn't know if you were home. I was so scared. I thought maybe you were in an accident or something happened at work. I didn't know. I held her hand and said, "I'm sorry, Whitney. I'm here. I'm okay." She nodded, but her face was still tense. I felt angry now. This was not right. My boss called me. I did not answer. That is normal. It is 5:50 in the morning. People sleep at that time. But then he called my wife. Why? I had to call him back. I pressed the call button. Mr. Richard said, "Anthony, where have you been?" I said, "I was sleeping." My boss said, "There is a problem with the machine. The workers can't use it. We need you here now," I said. "I'll be there." I looked at Whitney and said, "I'll fix it and come back." I arrived at the factory around 6:30. I checked the machine. Everything looked normal. I pressed the start button. The machine started just like that. No problem. I felt angry. I woke up early. My wife got scared. And for what? For this, a machine that works fine. Mr. Richard walked in at that moment. I said, "The machine's working." He said, "Well, that's good, Anthony." "Maybe it was just a temporary issue." I said, "You called me at 5:50 in the morning. You also called my wife." Mr. Richard said, "Yes, because you didn't answer." I said, "That's not okay. My wife was sleeping. You woke her up. She was scared. She thought something bad happened to me." Mr. Richard crossed his arms. He said, "I needed to reach you." I said, "At 5:50 for a machine that is working right now?" He said, "This is business, Anthony. We lose money when machines stop." I said, "Yes, I understand that. But there are limits. You can call me. That's fine. But you don't call my wife." That is personal. Mr. Richard said, Anthony, I was trying to solve a problem. I knew if I stayed quiet, it would happen again. I said, I think you should apologize to my wife. His face changed. He said, apologize for what? I said, for calling her so early, for crossing a line. Mr. Richard shook his head. He said, no, I'm not going to apologize. Anthony, this is how work is. Sometimes things happen early. Sometimes you have to respond. I said, I understand that, but you called my wife. I never gave you her number for this. That number is for emergencies. He said, this was an emergency. I said, no, it was not. If I called your wife at 5:50 in the morning, how would you feel? If I said, hey, I can't reach your husband. Where is he? How would you feel? Mr. Richard looked away, and I could see it. He understood, but he still wasn't ready to admit it. He said, I think you're taking this too personally. I said, of course it is personal. It's my wife. Mr. Richard said, I didn't mean to scare her. I said, I know, but you did. He said, I still don't think I need to apologize. I said, okay, if you don't think it's wrong, then we have a bigger problem. Mr. Richard said, what do you mean? I said, it means this can happen again. Today it's a machine. Tomorrow it's something else. Maybe you call her again. He said, fine. I won't call your wife again, but I won't apologize. I said, then I will write it in an email. His eyes narrowed. He said, an email? You're going to report me? I said nothing. I sat down and looked at my computer screen. I took a deep breath. Then I began to type. I wrote about the calls and the time. I wrote that I did not answer because I was asleep. I wrote that calling my wife was not okay. I wrote that this was not an emergency. The machine was working when I arrived. There was no danger. I wrote that I respect my job, but I also respect my family. Please do not contact my wife again. She deserves an apology. I pressed send. 6 hours later, a message came. It was from Mr. Richard. It said, Anthony, I will not contact your wife again. As for the apology, I will consider your request. It was not an apology, not really, but it was not a full no either. After my shift, I drove home. Whitney hugged me and said, Anthony, is everything okay? I said, the machine is fine. There was no real problem. Whitney looked confused. She said, then why all that stress? I told her everything, about my talk with Mr. Richard, about the email. Then she asked, will he apologize? I said, I don't know. Whitney said, it's okay. You stood up for me. I said, I love you, Whitney. The next morning, when I checked my phone, I saw a new message. It was from Mr. Richard. It said, Anthony, I thought more about our conversation. I understand now. I'm sorry for calling your wife so early and causing her fear. That was not right. It will not happen again. I looked at Whitney and said, Mr. Richard apologized. Whitney smiled. She said, that's good. Later that day, I went to work again. Things felt normal. Mr. Richard nodded at me when he saw me. I nodded back. No anger, no tension. Sometimes problems happen. But how we handle them, that is important. If something feels wrong, say it. protect your people. Because at the end of the day, work is just work. But family is everything. If you liked this story, please like, comment, share, and subscribe.